poor and homeless are already a group of people suffering many deprivations and difficulties. But in Washington, D.C., those harshness seem to be becoming heavier than ever. In July 2025, President Donald Trump signed a new executive order, promoted as a strong blow to eliminate crime and improve street conditions. For some, this is a ray of hope, promising to bring order and safety. But for thousands of homeless people, that policy is like a storm sweeping away the temporary roof they are clinging to. Tents were demolished, familiar carts disappeared, and their existence suddenly became a burden of being chased away instead of being cared for. In today's video, we'll dive into the reality unfolding on the streets of DC. From spreading tent camps and makeshift shelters to the silent but impactful consequences of repressive policy. We will hear the voices of residents, urban administrators, and most importantly, the very people who are living every day full of uncertainty, where every step is a struggle for survival. It's hard to believe, but it's true. Right in the capital of the United States of America, symbol of power and freedom, is having one of the most serious homeless crises in the country. Washington, D.C. currently has about 7 residents for every 1,000 people at risk of falling into the sky and earth, 7 times higher than the average rate of the entire region. In this city alone, more than 5,000 people are living in shelters or sidewalks, parks, under bridges. Although statistics show that the homeless rate decreased by 9% from 2024 to 2025, the overall picture is still worse than in 2021. In particular, the leap in 2024 left a deep mark on the lives of people who had nothing left to lose. However, the already complex crisis has now been pushed even higher after controversies over the federal government's policies. Measures supported by President Donald Trump include federalizing the DC police force, mobilizing the National Guard to clean up homeless camps. Many homeless people are asked to leave their shelters immediately, leaving only 2 options: go to healing programs and mental services, or wander without shelter. At the same time, the government also stopped supporting the Housing First program, policy that used to provide accommodation immediately without preconditions. Community organizations are concerned that disruption of existing efforts will make it difficult for homeless people to make the transition to permanent housing. The worry lies not only in the lack of accommodation, the lack of durable solutions, but also in the risk of their rights being violated when they are forced to leave their familiar communities, perhaps even facing detention. However, despite causing controversy, all decrees on paper have been realized through action. Since August 2025, more than 40 camps have been dismantled. Instead of the familiar sounds of life, every morning in DC now sounds metal and wood crushed under bulldozer wheels. For many people, it's not just about losing their last abode. It's about feeling like they're being chased in the very city they once considered the place they belonged to. Anxiety was heightened when residents witnessed the Capitol, police, and federal agents erecting posts, blocking vehicles, handcuffing, and detaining some destitute people in the heart of the city. For some people, these measures provide a temporary sense of security. But for most residents, that peace of mind is only fleeting, but the insecurity is smoldering, longer lasting, and heavier than before. This is no longer the solution to a social problem, but rather like a silent battle to erase the presence of people who have nothing but misfortune. Will clearing the camps and forcing thousands of people out of shelters really solve the homeless crisis in Washington, D.C.? Or will it just make them disappear from our sight? And the pain will still be there, but more silently and unseen than ever. After the supposed campaigns to fix homelessness, the lives of the needy are made even more fragile, like the fragile candle before the storm. Instead of giving them a proper home to return to, the government chose to clean up the mass camps, turning the homeless into homeless again. Since the decree, a series of campaigns to wipe out the camp in DC have simultaneously taken place. Dozens of people were forced to leave the shelter they had been in for many years, which they still call house. The sight of bulldozers flattening, the sound of broken wood, and the sound of metal colliding with each other from tents has become a familiar symphony for residents here. As for the residents in that refugee area, this is not just a noise, but a complete collapse of hope. People who had lost everything were now forced to leave their final homes. Where did they go? No one knows. Many people describe their feelings as being nothing more than being chased, as if their existence was a nuisance that needed to be eliminated. More painfully, those who do not comply can face fines or even prison sentences. But think about it. A person has nothing left but a few torn blankets. How can he pay the fine? And so, the only remaining door is prison. This makes many capital residents and experts worried that these drastic measures, instead of addressing the roots, could unintentionally worsen the homeless crisis, if not parallel with sustainable housing solutions. Although the government affirms that it has arranged temporary shelter centers, the reality is harsh. The number of beds is too small compared to the number of thousands of people who need a roof. In just a short time, this system quickly fell into overload. The promises are filled with hope, as the government, after eliminating the camps, will give them stable accommodation and shelter. But where those places are is still a question. There is no specific address, no clear conditions, and no long-term plans. For homeless people, who have lived a blurry life, that ambiguity is like pushing them into a new dead end. Many community activists have spoken out. Instead of coercion, instead of flattening and driving away, what they need is real resources, is a policy rooted in love and understanding, not from the sound of military footsteps or forced orders. Yet, while arguments and decisions remain tug-of-war, homeless people themselves are pushed deeper into a spiral of despair, from which there seems to be no way out. Can a civilized society really be called fair, if the way we treat the weakest is just to erase them from sight instead of giving them a home? For decades, Washington, D.C. has been known for its concentration of political power and job opportunities. However, accompanying that development is a bitter truth. Housing costs in the capital are increasingly beyond the reach of many residents. According to many published statistics, the average rent in DC has increased rapidly over the past 10 years, while the income level of unskilled workers has not kept up. Thousands of working families who may have tried to maintain a small apartment are now forced to leave their familiar homes. Some moved to the suburbs, others had no choice but to sleep in the car or find a place in temporary tents. What makes the problem even more serious is the shortage of affordable housing. Many construction programs were once promised, but in reality, the growth rate of luxury apartments always far exceeds the construction rate of affordable apartments. As a result, the growing gap between people can and people can't pays for a roof. Many DC residents have shared the feeling of helplessness when having to spend more than half of their income just to pay rent. When half of the monthly earnings disappear in exchange for a few walls and a bare roof, every other expense, from food, medical to raising a child, becomes a heavy burden. And with just one small event such as job loss, illness, or sudden price increase, many people immediately fall out of the fragile safety net, becoming homeless. Some community organizations and charities have tried to fill this gap by providing rent support, providing financial training programs, or helping people access temporary housing opportunities. However, their size is too small to combat a systemic problem. The bigger question remains: is the city determined enough to put social interests above commercial interests? To face this crisis, experts say that a long-term solution cannot lack the participation of both the public and private sectors. Some large real estate corporations in the US, such as Habitat for Humanity, have proven that building affordable housing is not only an act of charity, but can also become a sustainable model if it combines social, business, and community resources. Such initiatives, if replicated in DC, could bring hope to thousands of people struggling to keep their homes. Should in a wealthy society like America, owning a home should be the privilege of just a few? Or should it be a basic right of every human being? When it comes to the causes of the worsening of the homeless crisis in Washington, D.C., it is difficult to ignore two closely intertwined factors: job losses and economic instability. These are not only short-term fluctuations in personal life, but also a series of dominoes that shake the whole community. Many residents shared that they used to have stable jobs, but then an unexpected incident. The company cut staff, the small store had to close, or the profession they were attached to was replaced by machinery caused them to lose their only source of income. A small slide in personal economics becomes the beginning of a spiral: unpaid rent, mounting debt, and eventually the loss of a home. Economic instability also does not stop at the lack of work. Escalating prices, especially for food, gasoline, and medical costs, make already tight wages even more meaningless. People have to face harsh choices: pay rent or buy medicine, keep electricity lit in the apartment, or take care of meals for the family. And with just one wrong choice or an unexpected expense, many people immediately fall into homelessness. Job losses also create a knock-on effect. One person losing their job can lead the whole family into crisis. If parents do not have income, their children will no longer have a stable environment to study. Young people are forced to drop out of school to rush into the unsafe labor market, continuing the spiral of uncertainty. Individuals fall to the homeless line, and entire communities fall behind. The scary thing is that once you have lost your job and home, returning to normal life is almost impossible. Because in modern society, every door seems to require a residential address, a proof of stability. Without an address, you can't get a job. Without a job, you can't rent a house. That vicious cycle keeps people stuck, no matter how hard they try. In the face of this situation, many experts stress that only temporary solutions such as shelter stations or free meals are not enough. Without the creation of a sustainable economic environment, with stable jobs and a living wage, the homeless crisis will only continue to spread. Some large businesses in the US have begun implementing vocational training programs and creating job opportunities for the once homeless. For example, Walmart and Amazon both announced initiatives aimed at providing jobs to disadvantaged people, giving them the opportunity to return to the labor market. This may not be the only solution, but at the very least, it opens a door for those who have been left behind to have a chance to stand up. Is it possible to end the homeless spiral if stable work and a living wage remain just a distant dream for millions of Americans? In America, the social protection system was built with the goal of supporting the vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, the poor, and especially those who no longer have a home to rely on. But as the economic and social crisis deepens, the system itself gradually becomes an overloaded machine, operating slowly and helplessly in the face of increasing demand. Over the past several years, the budget for the basic subsidy programs has frequently been in an inadequate situation. People talk about welfare funds and emergency assistance programs, welfare systems, but for many homeless people or poor families, those concepts are just like distant promises. They go to social centers, wait in line for hours, even days, only to receive back shakes of their heads. No more seats, no more beds, no more enough manpower. This reality shows a bitter paradox. The system designed to protect the most vulnerable people is leaving them alone in their most miserable moments. Social experts believe that part of the reason is due to lack of personnel, lack of funding, and especially lack of a long-term vision. When the economy fluctuates, when unemployment increases, when the cost of living escalates, the number of people who need help skyrockets, and the ability to respond is almost stationary. Some reports have shown that in many major cities, support programs such as meal vouchers, rental subsidies, or emergency medical packages are always in a state of fire from mid-year. This causes the poor to live in a vicious cycle. They seek help, but receive nothing, then have to return to the streets with the risk of disease and insecurity. To change this situation, many opinions believe that a comprehensive reform is needed, increasing the budget, allocating resources transparently, and more importantly, building long-term policies instead of just reacting according to situation. A society is only truly strong when the weakest are not left behind. And that is also the reason why large corporations and businesses are encouraged to participate. In fact, brands like Walmart have implemented many community support programs, from scholarships, meal gifts, to emergency housing funds. If public and private resources can connect, hope remains for a more humane and sustainable social protection system. Are we building a sharing society, or are we just building invisible walls that push the weak into darkness? For decades, America has come across many policies and measures to deal with homelessness. From setting up temporary shelters to food assistance programs and subsidies, most of which are situational, deal with the immediate future and do not create sustainable change. This makes many people question, is there another path, not yet gone, but not yet? One of the most talked about ideas is the first housing policy. Instead of forcing homeless people to meet conditions such as finding a job, healing, or going through complicated procedures to stay, this model puts them in stable housing first. From there, they have the foundation to find stability in life. In some cities where experimentation has been applied, this approach shows a positive signal, but on a national scale, it has not yet really become a priority. In addition, there are proposals for a low-cost community housing model where residents share costs and enjoy lower rents than the market. However, these models are often constrained by scarce land funds, rising construction costs, and opposition from some communities concerned about the effects on the surrounding habitat. All of this makes the dream of housing for everyone remain unfinished. Another solution discussed is to increase vocational training and employment opportunities for the homeless. Many non-profits have organized career guidance programs, from basic skills training to business networking. But a common problem is lack of funding and lack of long-term coordination between the government and the private sector. Those efforts are often just lonely spots of light, not strong enough to dispel the darkness. In addition, a little talked about but no less important approach is comprehensive healthcare for the homeless. They often have to live in unsanitary conditions, are susceptible to diseases, and have difficulty accessing health services. When there is no health, any recovery plan becomes almost impossible. Health policies tied to shelter and community support can be the key to giving them a real chance to stand up. In that context, a number of large corporations began to participate. For example, the Walmart Foundation has sponsored many community programs, from food supply to job training to supporting the construction of sustainable housing models. When public and private resources combine, the ray of hope can become clearer. Because a fairer society cannot only place a burden on the shoulders of the authorities, that must be a shared responsibility. If there was another way to change the lives of millions of people, would we have the courage to walk? Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, is considered the center of power and symbol of a rich and strong country. But behind the glowing government buildings, a completely different reality is taking place in the streets. It is the dim future of thousands of helpless people who have been struggling to survive in an increasingly expensive and unstable city. Over the past few years, the cost of living in DC has continuously escalated. Rents are rising steadily each year, while the incomes of unskilled workers are not keeping pace. Those who used to have stable jobs, used to rent a small apartment, are now forced to move out into the street when their contracts expire and new rents far exceed their means of payment. Some experts believe that this price increase is influenced by many factors. the scarcity of affordable housing, speculative real estate investment, and high demand from groups with good incomes. As a result, the disadvantaged class is pushed away from the city centre, even out of the safety circle of society. Meanwhile, social support programs, while they exist, are not enough to shelter all. Numerous reports indicate that the number of beds in shelters covers only a fraction of the actual needs. The system, already fragile, now has to bear the additional pressure of thousands of people who have just lost their homes. Promises of building more housing, increasing subsidies, or expanding health services often ring out in meetings, but fade away when people need them most. For many people, belief in change is gradually becoming fragile. The biggest difficulty is the vicious circle. Lack of affordable housing leads people to homelessness, while homelessness entails huge social costs, from emergency health to security and order. Instead of being solved at the root, the problem seems to be only moved from one street corner to another, from one temporary camp to another. From the perspective of many community activists, it is nothing more than an increasingly extensive wound, while bandages are never enough. However, among those dark patches, there were still glimmers of light. Many large businesses have begun to participate in community support programs. Some technology and retail corporations, such as Amazon, have committed to investing in affordable housing projects and directly supporting non-profit organizations. Although this is not yet a comprehensive solution, it at least opens up hope that the future can change if the public and private sectors shake hands more substantively. Can a city truly reach for a bright future if right in its heart, thousands of people are still living in the darkness of oblivion? Whether in Washington, D.C. or any other American city, the image of people wandering on the sidewalks not only reflects a housing crisis, but is also a mirror to the imperfection of the entire society. Every political decision, every policy that makes, without understanding and humanity, will turn those lives into invisible people right in the heart of the capital of the richest country in the world. Previous generations believed that America was the promised land, where everyone had the opportunity to rise. But today, when looking back at this scene, many people wonder, where will the future of our children and grandchildren go, if even now we are powerless in the face of obvious injustices? Can a nation truly be called great, if right in its heart there are still helpless people? If you have ever witnessed or experienced a similar situation, please share your story or feelings in the comments section. Don't forget to click, like, share to let more people know, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming analysis. Your opinion is what nourishes this discussion. Please leave a comment below. The content in this video was created for the purpose of sharing information and provoking reflection on social issues. We do not declare this to be an absolute truth, nor do we represent any organization or government agency. Some of the data in question are general, insufficiently verified, and serve only to illustrate the big picture. Every analytical opinion in the video comes from an independent perspective, with the only desire to create connection, empathy, and dialogue in the community.